and what we stand for. Our job between now and November is to make sure everyone we know understands that the power to make change rests on our ability to cast a vote. Fair and safe voting is going to be more important than ever this year. And that's why When We All Vote is fighting to expand vote by mail, in-person early voting, and online voter registration. Now, I'm going to be honest. We're really going to need your help to make these efforts a success. Luckily, the first step is an easy one. Just spread the word. Make sure your friends, families, and communities are registered, know their rights, and are fully prepared to vote by mail this year or vote early in person. So, go to whenweallvote.org to find out more and get yourselves, your families, and your friends ready to make their voices heard. Let's get more folks across the country trained with the tools, the resources, and the information they'll need to vote, because this election couldn't be more important.
I'm April Ryan, and on behalf of the Coalition of Civil Rights and Social Justice Organizations, welcome back to Day 2 of the 2020 Virtual March on Washington, commemorating the 57th anniversary of the historic March on Washington. What an incredible 2 days of events we've had, filled with unforgettable moments, messages of inspiration, and setting the bold new Black agenda as we advocate for comprehensive reform, economic empowerment, and equitable access to healthcare, education, and the ballot box. So let's get night 2 started by taking a look at the highlights from earlier today during the March on Washington and a very special performance of Lift Every Voice and Sing.
We have mastered the selfie and TikToks. Now we must master ourselves. Less than a year before he was assassinated, my grandfather predicted this very moment. He said that we were moving into a new phase of the struggle. The first phase was the civil rights, and the new phase is genuine equality. And I want to ask the young people here to join me in pledging that we have only just begun to fight, and that we will be the generation that moves from me to we. We are going to be the generation that dismantles systemic racism once and for all, now and forever. We are going to be the generation that calls a halt to police brutality and gun violence once and for all, now and forever. We are going to be the generation that reserves climate change and saves our planet once and for all, now and forever. And we are going to be the generation that ends poverty here in America, the wealthiest nation on earth, once and for all, now and forever.
I am one of the millions of young Black women who make up the backbone of the American progressive movement. Like too many of us, my journey of activism started by a senseless act of gun violence when a fellow student opened fire in my classroom in Parkland, Florida. As I laid beneath the lifeless body of my classmate, Nicholas Dorat, to survive, as bullets riddled my classmates, as my screams melted into the cries of the wounded, I was then born again with a voice that cannot and will not be muzzled. Gun violence is pervasive and extends well beyond high-profile mass shootings. This violence is not inherent or a coincidence. It is a result of poor choices made by policymakers that all too often have racial undertones associated with it.
And so today we come to acknowledge that we ask America not to fear us. We ask you not to send tweets that we are attacking you as a mob, because the militia walks around freely and shoots us without anyone's concern. And so we are standing here today to say why we can't wait. We want an America that will stomp out the divisiveness, the intimidation, and the threat. We want a White House who stands as a healer in chief, who understands Black mothers' pain and understands your pain.
Silence is not an option. because Black people face a symbolic chokehold every time we walk, speak up, shop, jog, drive, and yes, breathe. So we must tear down the walls of injustice. I am standing here and saying, as Martin Luther King Jr. said, in America, a riot is the language of unheard people. And what is it that America has failed to hear? Promises and freedom and justice for all. Say their names: Ahmaud, Breonna, George, Jacob, and the list goes on. Black Lives Matter.
Our African American brothers and sisters are not alone. Dr. King spoke of the inescapable network of mutuality. In this moment of crisis, so many Americans are bound together in the mutual struggle for justice, dignity, and opportunity. From the Native American tribes confronting the scourge of COVID and the delay of their stimulus funding, to Latinx children being separated from their parents at the border, to Asian Americans facing hate-fueled attacks, to working families across this country struggling with poverty. We can change all of this. With the right leadership, we can heal our wounds. We can turn hardship into hope, despair into dreams. We can advance racial equality and restore the soul of our nation. But only if we do it together.
August 28th is a day to remember the triumphs and tragedies that have taken place in our historic struggle for racial justice. Today, we commemorate the March on Washington to Jobs and Freedom in 1963, where my father declared his dream. But we must never forget the American nightmare of racist violence exemplified when Emmett Till was murdered on this day in 1955, and the criminal justice system failed to convict his killers. 65 years later, we still struggle for justice, demilitarizing the police, dismantling mass incarceration, and declaring and determinedly as we can that Black Lives Matter. If Dad were here today, I'm sure he would implore us not to deify him or selectively quote him when convenient. He would want us to be drama majors for justice, to champion the ideals he promoted: racial justice, social equality, and peace. And he would gently but intently challenge us not to dwell upon the past, but to live and labor in what he called the fierce urgency of now. So if you're looking for a savior, get up and find a mirror. We must become the heroes of the history we are making. And us means all of us.
This moment is a reminder that we must always honor the sacrifice of the leaders who made that march happen. From the names we know, like Randolph and Farmer, Young and King, to everyone who worked behind the scenes and sacrificed quietly but profoundly, far from the lights of history. I have to believe that if they were with us today, they would share in our anger and frustration as we continue to see Black men and women slain in our streets and left behind by an economy and justice system that have too often denied Black folks our dignity and rights. They would share our anger and pain, but no doubt they would turn it into fuel. They would be lacing up their shoes, locking arms, and continuing right alongside us to continue in this ongoing fight for justice. The road ahead, it is not going to be easy. But if we work together to challenge every instinct our nation has to return to the status quo and combine the wisdom of longtime warriors for justice with the creative energy of the young leaders today, we have an opportunity to make history right here and right now.
Greetings, NAACP and virtual March on Washington family. This is Reverend Mark Thompson. Been down here on the mall today. I'm not gonna lie, I'm exhausted. I hope I can make it home, but this was a beautiful day. Don't know what the numbers are yet, but the mall was pretty full. I can only imagine how full it would have been had all of the buses from the COVID states that are hotspots been allowed to come in. But I want to congratulate all who put together this NAACP virtual March on Washington for safety. We've just got to keep fighting for justice. Today is the anniversary of Jackie Robinson signing with the Dodgers, the anniversary of Emmett Till's martyrdom, the anniversary of the Great March on Washington, and the anniversary of Barack Obama's acceptance speech for the Democratic nomination in 2008. This is a sacred day. Our lives are sacred. Our bodies are sacred. So I was asked just to report to you when everything was over. It was a great day. Go back and watch it on the internet. So many families here. There were so many families have suffered losses. We didn't even have enough time to hear from all the families. And that's not a good problem to have. There shouldn't be a whole line of people struggling to get the mic because their loved ones have been killed. It's too many. And we know, as the NAACP says, we done died. We've got to decide that for ourselves. I love you all. Happy August 28th. Forwards ever, backwards never. And we're so thankful for this opportunity and for what the NAACP does. Fired up, ready to go. Fired up, y'all. Ready to go. I love you. This is Reverend Mark Thompson, over and out.
All right, everybody. Sing with me. You know this one. Here we go. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark Christ has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Yeah, let us march on till victory is won. All right, let us march on till victory is won. Thank you.
What an incredible event. Although we were not there in person, we can still celebrate the moment of this movement. Next up is the chairman of the board of directors of the NAACP, Leon W. Russell, followed by messages from Beverly Smith, president and CEO of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, and Dr. David Marion, Grand Basilisk of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity.
Thank you for attending the virtual March on Washington. I'm Leon Russell, chairman of the National Board of the NAACP. We're here to support those who marched in Washington today for jobs, for freedom, and for progress in this nation. In the 60s, it was all about jobs and freedom. We're still asking for the end of discrimination. We're still asking for an end to police brutality. We're still asking for the disparate conditions in our educational system, in our healthcare system, in the area of environment, in housing. We have to ensure that we deal with the issue of regentrification. We have to make sure that Black and brown people continue to live in a community where they prospered for the last 70, 80, 100 years. We have to deal with the fact that in too many instances, even when they see it themselves, we're seeing repeat performances of Black folks being shot by the police. We have to talk about how we interact for public safety in our communities. That's another non-negotiable. Education is extremely important for our community. We have to think about the fact that we should not saddle people with tremendous debt if we truly believe that an education is the way for them to move the future. It's all about how our government deals with those issues. And the only way that we deal with that is to ensure that we have people in government who are responsive to our needs and the needs of our communities. That means we have to vote. And when we vote, we have to hold those whom we elect accountable for the actions that we expect them to take. If they don't do it, come the next election, it's time to remove them from office and move people in who will do that. We have to vote. Our lives depend on it.
Hi, I'm Beverly Smith, National President and CEO for Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. On August 28, 1963, a young 34-year-old man stood on a platform and talked about a dream, a vision he had for the future. He fought for that dream. He died for that dream. And since his time, when he assumed and hoped that the right to vote would come for all and that equity would come in our society, there have many have come after him. Our soars, like Daisy Bates, who was with the Little Rock Nine, like what Mary McLeod Bethune, who attempted to make sure equity happened and worked with presidents back to the days of Roosevelt, like Fannie Lou Hamer, who was sick and tired of being sick and tired. From that time to Dorothy Height, all the way up to the stars we have today, who work in the political scene to try and make sure they give their lives and their time for our right to vote. In remembering these who fought for us, in remembering a John Lewis who wanted us to stay in good trouble, all to make sure the right to vote was ours, we have a responsibility, my brothers and sisters, not just Deltas, but all of us, to make sure that we stand up and make sure our voice and our power is heard. We get that through voting. We get that through participating in the census. We get that by making sure we are not forgotten in a time when we need to make sure that we are remembered for all we stand for and for all we do every day in our communities. We make a difference, but we can make a greater difference if we exercise the power we have to participate in the census, to vote, as many have said, as if our lives depended on it, because our lives and the lives of the 34-year-olds who are out there today, of my grandsons, to make sure that they don't have to worry about having the same dream, but that what Martin Luther King fought for and what August 28th meant in 1963 no longer means today or tomorrow. But those things of that vision, that dream are realized. But it all depends on us. It all depends on you. Vote as if your life depended on it, because it does.
I'm Dr. David Marion, the 41st Grand Basileus of the Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated. And on behalf of almost 200,000 initiated men in 750 chapters and in 15 countries, I salute the National Action Network, the NAACP, and all partners who organized this March for Justice. Since 1911, Omega men have stood at the forefront of political and social change. And our brother Bayard Rustin served as the architect of the original March on Washington in 1963 and made it his life's work to ensure we all had the opportunity of the American dream. However, for all the improvements our parents and grandparents persevered and fought for, our labors are far from over. As we've witnessed in recent years, our brothers and sisters remain under attack from institutions that demean our humanity and deny us the right to live as all free people should. Today, Omega Men march to demand complete congressional restoration of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 to ensure our vote is not eroded by racist laws seeking to restrict our voting accessibility and silence our vote. We also march to ensure that our children and grandchildren never fear that the color of their skin makes them a target for harassment or violence. In addition to the value of completing the 2020 census, the men of the Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated recognize that real change starts at the ballot box and ask you to join us in continuing this march through November 3rd to the polls and have our voice and vote heard.
Hi, I'm Natalie Achanwa with the Indiana Fever.
I'm Elizabeth Williams with the Atlanta Dream.
Sue Bird with the Seattle Storm.
I'm Sydney Colson with the Chicago Sky.
Neko Gwumake with the LA Sparks.
Malaysia Clarendon with the New York Liberty.
Brianna Stewart with the Seattle Storm.
Sierra Ruffin-Pratt with the Los Angeles Sparks.
Sata Sabali with the Dallas Wings. Please join us and other changemakers to get out and vote on Election Day.
Our lives depend on quality education.
Jobs that pay a living wage.
And equal opportunities for our children.
Our lives depend on having healthy communities.
Access to clean air and water. And to live without the burden of crippling student debt.
Our lives depend on fair laws.
In a country that cares about all its people.
Black.
White.
Hispanic.
Asian.
Queer.
Trans.
Straight.
This Election Day, we need everyone
to get out and vote.
Because our lives.
Our lives.
Our lives.
Our lives.
Our lives? Because our lives depend on it.
Thank you, Chairman Russell, Ms. Smith, and Dr. Marion. For generations, we've marched, shouted, and carried signs demanding our civil rights. We've made progress, but the struggle continues. If you want to know which issues we faced along the way, just read the signs.
This day is our day, and we want to let them know that the black contingent of men, women, and children have a significant vote in this country.
This been going on before Michael Brown. This been going on before Trayvon Martin, before Emmett Till. We are just sick and tired.
You must disperse immediately or be subject to arrest.
Trayvon Martin was first shot, I said that this could have been my son. Trayvon Martin could have been me 35 years ago.
like to now welcome Dr. Everett Ward, General President of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity, Dr. Yusef Salaam, one of the Exonerated Five, and Mayor Stephen Reed of the city of Montgomery. Immediately following these esteemed gentlemen will feature a special performance by Atlantic recording artist Burna Boy.
My name is Everett Ward, and I am the General President of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity, and also have the privilege to serve as the Chairman of the Council of Presidents of the National Panhellenic Council. Today, as we celebrate the 57th anniversary of the March on Washington, let us join together, unlike any other time in history, that we march to the polls on November the 3rd, that we march to our mailboxes and post office to send in our 2020 census information, because those are two of the most important acts that we have between now and November the 3rd. In August of 1963, some 200,000 citizens from across America came to Washington, D.C., and they marched for freedom and justice and jobs. And from their marching and from their rightful agitation, there were two pieces of federal legislation that followed: the Voting Rights Act of 1965 and the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So today our mission is clear. We must march to the polls. We must make certain that we are counted. We must make certain that all children have equal access to quality education. And in COVID-19, it has been revealed to us that health disparities must be a priority for all of us, but especially in the African American community and communities of color. So as we celebrate the 57th anniversary on the March on Washington, let us celebrate the legacy that we have inherited by marching for freedom and justice in 2020, just as hard as our forebears did some 57 years ago. So I say, march on, my brothers and sisters. Let us march to freedom rings, and let us march until justice truly is enjoyed by all citizens, and that racial bigotry is ended in these United States of America.
Peace and blessings, family. This year marks the 57th anniversary of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s March on Washington, where he delivered his historic I Have a Dream speech in 1963. I am continuing to push forward and achieve Dr. King's dream by using my personal experience to add to the ingredients in the kaleidoscope of the human family, arising the very best of ourselves. Although this was 100 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, we are still fighting to be free. We just experienced the death anniversary of Emmett Lewis Till. He was 14 when the ultimate horror of America visited him. I too wanted the American dream, but was jolted awake to the American nightmare. I am Dr. Yusef Salaam, one of the Exonerated Five. 31 years ago, we were legally lynched by an ad that called for the reinstatement of the death penalty. There was no innocent until proven guilty. We were castigated because of the color of our skin and not the content of our character. Coupled with the duality of the American judicial system, our convictions were signed, sealed, and delivered before we were able to mount a defense. This allows systemic oppression, slavery by another name, to continue. To be ensnared by the criminal system of injustice is to be relegated to second-class citizenship. This position on the board of life removes all power from the people. We matter. Black lives matter. We make up the overwhelming majority of the landscape of the prison industrial complex. But I'm here to tell you there is hope. There has been a push to suppress voters during this pandemic. We have to come together and symbolically march to the polls to exercise our collective power and right to vote. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be televised. I can remember when that statement made me sad inside. Too young to be in it. Now I couldn't even see it. Why? Why couldn't the revolution be televised? The Last Poets, Gil Scott-Heron, As I grew up, I began to see. They left theirs, and I too wanted to leave a mark on history. A man in half, and I wanted to bask in that task that set men free. But a revolution, the revolution, is where I knew I had to be. The revolution will not be televised. They didn't want to display the victory of those quote unquote lesser men. The revolution will not be televised. Smile, I know, because we are the revolution. And in the immortal words of my mentor, Joanne Chesimard, also known to you as Assata Shakur, we have the power to fight. We have the power to win. We must love each other and protect each other. We have nothing to lose but our chains. Thank you.
57 years ago, during his famous I Have a Dream speech, the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said the American government had given the Negro people a bad check that had come back stamped insufficient funds. Many decades following the moment when A. Philip Randolph summoned other leaders of the Black community, the oppressed and the disenfranchised to the mall, there was a mandate from a people to the government leaders, the president, and society. These men were able to accomplish what had not yet been fulfilled. There had been fits and starts. Progress was made, but few goals had been reached. On this August 28th, many have been summoned to the nation's capital, as well as the state capitals, to demand that government officials on all levels hearken to the voices of its citizens. And we who are elected officials, sworn to an oath that is to protect and serve the citizens in which we represent, must no longer turn our heads or close our eyes. We must be honest and acknowledge that we see the conditions of this nation are yet to be ideal for far too many. We must confess that we hear the voices of those who cry out, and not only hear, but listen. Some of my colleagues will agree with me, and some may not. Some will believe that we can do more, while some will believe that we've done enough. We must remember that in less than 70 days, we as a nation will embark upon the polling stations to cast a vote for those who have presented themselves for leadership. We will also be casting votes to determine the true soul of this nation and the future that lies ahead. Today is a demonstration to this nation to say that we are better than we currently present ourselves. We are a nation that believes in the ideals of our forefathers, and we also know that we are responsible for making these ideals a reality. A. Philip Randolph knew that in the depths of his soul that this nation still owed its citizens more. Dr. King cast a dream for this nation for us to live up to that many of us are still working ourselves to live to the standard. And so I come to you from Montgomery, Alabama, the home of Dexter Avenue King Memorial Baptist Church, where Dr. King, John Robert Lewis, and many others led marches and protests right in front of the state capitol, where we must remember that those marches were led with the spirit of love and the dignity of compassion, not just for symbolism, but for substance, to change outcomes. That's why we gather here today. That's why we must continue to march. That's why we must vote. And that's why we must act.
Marginalization and injustice, the youth, so the next people coming after us, I think will be more brutal than what we have done.
Calling me a monster, calling us fake. No way, no way, no way. Calling me a monster just cause we say it.
We're from the block where it rains, where we create barricades, keep our position away. That's why we strap with the case. Don't get kidnapped from your place, cause it could happen today. Not knowing how to behave, that is a sign that you made. Just lose your life at a waste, your body found in the lake. You around and the fisherman man found you drowning for days. You know we come from a place where people smile but it's fake. How could they smile if you look around? They surrounded by pain. I seen the sky turn to gray, it took the the light from the day. It's like the heads of the state ain't comprehending the hate that the oppression the rain when they've been working like slaves to get some minimum wage. You turn around and you blame them for their anger and rage. Put them in shackles and chains because of what they became. We are the monsters you made.
Calling me a monster, calling us fake. You make them undertold the dollars away. Calling me a monster just cause we said no way, no way, no way. Calling me a monster, make no mistake that there's only so much that you can take. We are the monsters you made.
I bet they thought it was school, probably thought it was fools, but we would break all the rules and skip them classes in school because the teacher them teaching what the white man them teaching them European teachings in my African school. So the classes in school, Mungo Park on the fool. They said they found River Niger, they been lying to you. Ain't no denying the truth. See what I'm trying to do is draw the line for the mothers crying. We're dying as youth. Come walk a mile in my shoes. See if you smile at the truth. See if you die just your fool. That's when you might have a clue of what we go through. You're lucky if you live through the day. Better pray that God always staying with you. Ain't can save any day. The reaper be coming for you. We need a change and it ain't no way I'ma take an excuse. My finding a way, or can smile in the grave. This is the price that you pay. We are the monsters you made.
Calling me a monster, calling us fake. You make them undertold the dollars away. Calling me a monster just cause we said no way, no way, no way. Calling me a monster, make no mistake that there's only so much that you can take. We are the monsters you made.
We met you people 500 years ago. Look at us. We've given everything. You are still taking. In exchange for that, we have got nothing. Nothing. And you know it. But don't you think that this is over now? Over where? Is it over?
Thank you to all the speakers for those words of inspiration and that performance by Burna Boy. We hear you and we see you. The next group of speakers range from a member of Congress, filmmakers, and a 7-year-old philanthropist and a civil rights activist. They will be followed by a performance from Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater's Bernard J. Gilmore as he performs an excerpt of Our Evolution, Dream, choreographed by Hope Boykin in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and narrated by the great Leslie Odom Jr. Ladies and gentlemen, Representative Nanette Diaz-Barragan, writer-director Jared Bush with Christopher Renz, the founder of Cool and Dope, Kavanaugh Bell, and the president and CEO of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under the Law, Kristen Clark.
Hi, I'm Congressmember Nanette Barragan from Los Angeles. 57 years ago, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the NAACP, a young John Lewis, and many other social justice and civil rights leaders led the historic March on Washington. A young John Lewis spoke that day about no longer being patient and waiting for change to come. In his words, they're talking about slow down and stop. We will not stop. And John Lewis and Martin Luther King Jr. and so many other leaders and foot soldiers in the civil rights movement did not stop until they saw change. Our work is not done, and we must pick up and carry on and move forward and push for change and maybe get into some good trouble, necessary trouble while doing it. We are in some very trying times. We are in the middle of a pandemic that has only further highlighted the vast racial inequalities and outcomes for people of color in this country. The injustice of police brutality and structural racism in our criminal justice system are issues we've never stopped trying to bring attention to. Only now are more people seeing these inequities firsthand. We can and must build a world that defends human rights, protects justice, and always strives for equality. The NAACP has been leading this work for decades. I was proud to see this effort up close when I worked in the Washington Bureau under Hillary Shelton. I have taken those lessons I learned and have brought them with me to Congress, where I continue to be an advocate for these issues and a partner with the NAACP. It should not have taken the terrible murder of George Floyd to shake the conscience of this nation. But now we must take this opportunity to make real change. We must keep up this fight for racial, social, and environmental justice on the streets and in our communities, to the halls of Congress and across this country. That means getting out the vote. That means submitting our census forms. That means marching, organizing, and supporting one another through these difficult times. We're on our way. I'm proud to join you on this journey toward justice.
I'm Gerard Bush.
And I'm Christopher Renz, and we are the writer-directors of the upcoming film Antebellum.
The NAACP was founded in February of 1909, and here in the year 2020, we are realizing that this crucial work is more important than ever. We are witnessing the ongoing and durable assault on our democracy. Look no further than the U.S. Post Office. We need to get out and vote in unprecedented numbers.
So cast your mail-in ballot or put your mask on and crawl, walk, or run to the polls this November.
Make sure your voice is heard at the ballot. Our very democracy may depend upon it.
The time is always right to do what's right. And today, as we reflect on the legacy and work of Dr. King, it's up to us to not let his dream fade because of our inaction. I can't vote, but you can. You can take the powerful stand to create a better world for all of us. The world that Dr. King died trying to give us. I'm counting on you, and our future is too. You matter, your voice matters, and your vote counts. I love you guys. Peace.
This year's March on Washington marks an incredibly important moment in our democracy. We're at an inflection point. People all across the country are marching for an end to racial violence, an end to white supremacy, an end to police brutality. But this year's March on Washington is also a reminder that the other way in which we can wield power and exercise voice is by showing up and voting on Election Day. We're just a few weeks out from the November 3rd election. This is a critical moment to make sure that we ourselves and everyone in our family and our community, it's a time to make sure that everyone is registered to vote. It's a time to make sure that everyone has a plan for how they intend to vote given the ongoing pandemic. This is a moment where we need to remind people that it's not just about the power of protest in the streets, it's about bringing the power of our voices to the ballot box. It's about holding election officials accountable. It's about standing up and having voice. It's about championing and pushing for the reforms that we want to see in our communities, in our lives, and in the world. I hope that we will all embrace this March on Washington to reinvigorate our national call and our national fight for racial justice.
Hi, I'm Lorenz Tate. I want to let you in on a little secret. You have the power of 5. Right now, we need everyone to tap into their power. Do you know 5 people who you can help register new voters in your community? Let us know who they are. Together, we can fight for policies that respect and improve our communities. You can be an advocate for democracy and social justice. Help us change our country for the better with the power of 5. Visit naacp.org or text POWER to 40649 for more information.
We are heavy, pressing, pushing, striving more, always more. From the work of my back for aches, pain through. You say sow to grow, sowing will gain some too. What separates us from one another? What determines our rights? What defines for what we settle? Society tells what to believe, in who we trust, who must work, follow, lead. Our neighbors remind us what we have and don't. Better, bigger, us or them. But when will we? Although the cloth is the same, we see colors in class, warped reflections, imperfect through perfected pains, shattered glass, skin, eyes, nose, mouth. We all have hands and toes that often step and stand on the spirit of others, crushing plans and goals, reducing them, their pride, their person, all to a dust, expecting it to be free, normal, you say, is a must. Promotion promises elevation, but on what? And who are you pushing down to? Gain? Causing my living misfortunes of another's birthright to be in vain? Make me move it, shift it, make it, you take it, then fight me for mine, fast or slow, however, fast is better, but bring it, take from, get more, no wasted, don't waste my time. Start over, quick, hurry, do it now, it's mine. Standing side by side should remind us we are even, the same, equal. But equal in what? Education, value, strength, endurance, fight, determination, wealth, equal for the truth. Well, me too. Not just equal for you. Equality, yes, a relative thought. Truly, do you understand and still not evens want equal, same? Show me. Unequal is better than not. But easy now. It all comes down to this service. You can't count it, compare it, or rank it on scale. Life's end will give the warning of heart's metal. Passing time will tell real tales. Fighting for right in life and pressing to win the prize at the end of the race teaches those looking on whose life has been lived, granted mercy, blessed with grace. Cast away what you think you know, what they say, what you may have heard. I will determine your fate. Fate's ground is full and paved. Well deserved.
Thank you for spending these past 2 days with me. We have a lot of work to do, and we need your help to get it done. It's now time for the charge. And immediately following Reverend Barber's address, there will be a special performance by B.B. Winans, Black Lives Matter. Reverend Dr. William J. Barber II is the president and senior lecturer of Repairers of the Breach and co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign. He is also the architect of the Forward Together moral movement that gained national acclaim with its Moral Monday protests at the North Carolina General Assembly in 2013. Reverend Dr. Barber served as president of the North Carolina NAACP, the largest state conference in the South, from 2006 to 2017, and he currently sits on the National NAACP Board of Directors. A former Mel King Fellow at MIT, he is currently a visiting professor of public theology and activism at Union Theological Seminary and is a senior fellow at Auburn Seminary. Ladies and gentlemen, Reverend Dr. William J. Barber II. Good night.
August 28, 1963, 200,000 Americans came to Washington to demand complete freedom for everyone.
Well, we all live black and white, trying to fight for equal rights. Yeah. Keep your eyes on the prize. Hold on, hold on, hold on. Keep your eyes on the prize.
Greetings to my brothers and sisters who have decided to gather for the 57th anniversary of the March on Washington, the March for Jobs and Freedom. I want to thank my dear brother, President Derrick Johnson, and Chairman Leon Russell and all the members of the NAACP family and others who have participated in this digital gathering for asking us to come and join in giving a charge for the close of the evening. My name is Reverend Dr. William J. Barber II, President of Repairers of the Breach and co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for a moral revival, along with my co-chair, the Reverend Dr. Liz Theo Harris, who is the director of the Kairos Center at Union Theological Seminary. To give a charge today from an event that happened in yesteryear, we must first remember correctly. We must re-radicalize the March on Washington in our memories for this time, because far too often it has been corporatized and commercialized as an event far less radical than it actually was. In our collective memory, the March on Washington has even been viewed as a one-issue day, or as just a black day, as if the only reason people came together in 1963 was to demand the civil rights bill we got in 1964. But actually, this undercuts the meaning and the power of the original March on Washington. And when we do so, when we reduce its demands in our memory, if we falsely remember the fullness of why people gathered 57 years ago, then it is hard for us to give a charge from that day that fits the reality of our day. So let us remember properly. The March on Washington was not wanted when it was announced. It was feared. It was feared in the white community, even feared by some in the black community. An editorial in the New York Herald Tribune warned that if Negro leaders persist in their announced plans to march 100,000 strong on the Capitol, they will be jeopardizing their cause. The ugly part of this particular mass protest is its implication of unconstrained violence if Congress does not deliver it. They did not see the enemies of this march as nonviolent, peaceful. They saw it as a precursor to unconstrained violence and sought to do everything they could to stop it. Even President Kennedy called the leaders in and asked them not to meet and not to march. The March on Washington was on August 28th because that was the day Emmett Till had been killed 8 years earlier, murdered brutally with a cotton gin tied around his body as he was thrown into the river. Young people who knew they had to organize, young people who were rising up all over this nation in mass nonviolence against systemic racism, some of them were facing life sentences and even death sentences for simply marching for justice. The March on Washington was 36 days after the death of Medgar Evers, the murder of Medgar Evers. It was 18 days before the murder and the brutal bombing and slaying of 4 little girls in a Birmingham church. The original demands of the march was not one issue. It was for jobs with an S and freedom. King's speech, which we remember now as I Have a Dream, was actually titled Normalcy Never Again. Direct actions were taking place in over 600 cities across the nation. The March on Washington was not merely one person calling people to come to hear a person or persons speak. It was growing out of the movements that were happening around the nation. The goal was to change the narrative. The March on Washington was designed and timed to push Kennedy, who had been elected by a narrow margin, had benefited from the African American vote, but rather than acting in his first 100 days, for more than 2 years he had not passed or pushed meaningful legislation to undo the vestiges of slavery and Jim Crow. The Civil Rights Movement, America's second Reconstruction, had begun in earnest on May 17, 1954, with the NAACP's Supreme Court decision and victory in Brown versus Board of Education that declared separate but equal unconstitutional. But 9 years later, public schools were still not desegregated. Racism and Jim Crow and violence were on the rise across the nation. Some black leaders and some white leaders and preachers offered words of sentimentality. Some politicians were very sentimental, saying that things were wrong and bad, but their sentiments had not translated into serious policy. And so, as James Baldwin would say, that kind of sentimentality had become a mask to hide the cruelties of systemic evils. And so we have to first properly remember the charge of that day in order to hear a fresh charge for our day. Yes, the organizers of the March on Washington wanted Kennedy and the federal government, they wanted them to enact a comprehensive Civil Rights Act. But they refused to allow their demands to be reduced to just one issue. As John Lewis would say, we want all of our freedom, and we want it now. They wanted legislation that stopped legalized discrimination and voter suppression. They wanted legislation that declared jobs and federal contracts were only for those who didn't discriminate. Their cry was for jobs and freedoms, justice and equality. And they wanted it all in one bill, not 50, not 20, but one act. They knew that 100 years after the Emancipation Proclamation, the Negro was still not free, America was still not free, and they needed that freedom now, and they needed it, all of it. They were organized by a gay activist, Bayard Rustin. Sadly and mistakenly, we must even criticize ourselves, no women spoke at the March on Washington, but there was a protest for women to speak. It was led by Anna Hedgeman, a mighty activist, feminist, womanist, a mighty activist for the poor, who recruited 40,000 Protestants to the march. And what was said on that day, if we really want to charge from that day to this day, what was said? Well, A. Philip Randolph said it like this: we are here today, and we're only the first wave. When we leave, it will be to carry the civil rights revolution home with us into every nook and cranny of the land, and we shall return again and again to Washington in ever-growing numbers until total freedom is ours. NAACP Executive Director Roy Wilkins said, we want legislation that affirms life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and quality employment. John Lewis said on that day, we must have legislation that will protect the Mississippi sharecropper who is put off of his farm because he dares to register to vote. We must have a bill that will provide for the homeless, the poor, and the starving people of this nation. John Lewis was the only one that day that was that clear about poverty and homelessness. He went on to say, we need a bill that will ensure the equality of a maid who earns $5 a week in a home of a family whose total income is $100,000 a year. We have to first remember the charge of that day. Not allow it to be corporatized or commercialized or de-radicalized before we can give a charge for our day. Martin Luther King Jr. spoke of those crippled by the chains of discrimination, those on a lonely island of poverty, there's that word again, in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. Martin Luther King said, we have come to dramatize an appalling condition. To just think all he said was, I have a dream, and all he did was tell America about his dream, is to miss the radical charge of the March on Washington 57 years ago. Martin Luther King talked about a promissory note. He said America has defaulted on her promissory note giving the Negro a bad check, which has come back marked insufficient funds. And you know how you feel when you see someone that's giving you a bad check, and then you see them riding around with your money, and your check is still not cashing. That was the radical spirit. Martin was saying, you've lied to us. You've taken our free labor. You've taken all of the economic power that we've given this nation, and we've not seen what you promised come back. Then Martin went on to say, we refuse to believe that the Bank of Justice is bankrupt. In other words, we refuse to believe that there have to be so many on a lonely island of poverty. Then he said, listen, this is no time to take the tranquilizing drug of gradualism, because they were already hearing people say, we'll just let them march, and after they march, we'll go back to usual. We'll just continue to let these bills march along slowly. We'll allow them to continue to be filibustered. Martin said, listen, if you think this is just a hot summer, a time for blowing off steam, listen what he said, America will have a rude awakening if the nation returns to business as usual. There will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until citizens' rights are for everybody. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation. This was the charge and the context of that day then. So what is the charge today? I think in a very real sense, much of it we still have to say. We must first repent of not living up to A. Philip Randolph's promise. We did not come back successively, larger waves, to insist that the issue of justice and economic inequality be dealt with. We did not come back wave after wave, bringing the poor and the sharecropper and the maid. Far too long we have attempted the normalcy of a racial caste system in America. Far too long we've been comfortable with a few black people in position or a few good white people in position. Far too long we have been comfortable with the normal legislative process where compromise rather than conviction becomes the order of the day. And when all is said and done, we have less than what we were promised over and over again. And so to truly repent is to turn. It is to face our past and receive the charge that echoes across our lives 57 years later. We still must say to America in no uncertain terms, America will have a rude awakening if this nation returns to business as usual. We do not need the politicians who get elected this time, particularly if they benefit from the African American vote and the poor vote and the white vote and the brown vote and those who want progress, to engage in the tranquilizing drug of gradualism. 57 years later, we still have to fight and challenge systemic racism in all of its forms, not just one form, police violence, but all of its forms. Voter suppression, police brutality, resegregation of our public schools, continuing mistreatment of our immigrant brothers and sisters, particularly from Latin America, and our First Nation indigenous brothers and sisters. We must, 57 years later, recognize that we have 140 million poor and low-income people in this country, 62 million not earning a living wage, 700 people dying a day from poverty before COVID. Before COVID. The whirlwinds of revolt must continue to shake the foundations of this nation. We have 87 million people without health care before COVID. Another 27 million have been added since COVID because they've lost their jobs. 40% of those making $40,000 and less have lost their jobs. That's our charge. We still have to fight. 4 million families get up every morning before COVID and could buy unleaded gas and not buy unleaded water. Tens of millions of people are homeless or on the verge of homeless. We spend $800 billion on war. You want to know where the money is for health care, the money for infrastructure, the money for living wage is in $800 billion being spent for war in peace times. If we cut that budget in half, we would have more money in our war budgets than China, North Korea, Iran and Iraq and Russia combined. 53 cents of every discretionary dollar going to war, and not to the soldiers and the disabled, but to the companies, the corporations, those who benefit from the war economy, those who build things the Pentagon doesn't even ask for. And less than 16 cents is going to infrastructure and healthcare and education. And then we have a religious nationalism that keeps trying to tell us that the only moral issues are being against the LGBT community, the gay community, being against women's rights to choose, being against prayer in the school, being for tax cuts. And then many of them even say being for guns, when we know that is not in line with our deepest moral, religious, and theological values. Our deepest moral and religious and theological values tell us that our focus should be the least of these. When I was hungry, did you feed me? When I was naked, did you clothe me? When I was sick, did you care about me? When I was an immigrant, did you invite me in? And so 57 years later, our charge is that we still have work to do. We can't be at ease in Zion. We can't be weary in well-doing. And we must remember what Jesus said: the race is not given to the swiftest nor to the strongest, but to they that endure to the end. The charge is 57 years later, we still have to demand. We have to demand and say that when George Floyd said, "I can't breathe," his words were compelling shorthand, exposing America's enduring systemic racism and poverty, that it continues, and the death that is wrapped up in all of these vicious policies of inequality: health care, denial of health care, wages, unemployment insurance, denial of full and funded education, denial of housing, denial of dealing with policing and criminal injustice, denying water equality and air quality and environmental safety. All of them have a death measurement in them. And all of them, like George Floyd said, leaves us saying, "I can't breathe." And so our charge now is we must breathe, and we must breathe new life into the cause of justice, the cause of equal protection under the law, the cause of promoting the general welfare and establishing justice and providing for the common defense. How do we do this? Our demand must be, we demand that this country protect and expand voting rights, and that we have a pre-clearance formula that catches all jurisdictions covered by the Voting Rights Act and jurisdictions that have passed voter suppression laws since that weren't covered before. We must address police violence and mass incarceration and resegregation of our public schools. We must have meaningful recognition of indigenous sovereignty and the nationhood of our Apache, Navajo, and other indigenous brothers and sisters. 57 years later, we must demand health care for all. This includes Medicare for all and expansion of Medicaid and universal coverage right now for COVID treatment and for vaccines. This must include fully funding and expanding Indian health services to meet the need at hand. 57 years later, we must demand housing for all, expanding public housing and affordable housing and expanding rental assistance. We must stop evictions and foreclosure. We must have a bill that protects people from becoming homeless, and bills that must protect the lands of the indigenous and native communities. 57 years later, we must demand jobs and income for all. We must demand the establishment of a federal jobs guarantee that can build up healthcare infrastructure and capacity and schools and sanitation and water and climate infrastructure, including public transportation, and ensuring $15 an hour and a living wage and guaranteed adequate incomes for those who cannot work. We must establish a strong welfare program to lift up those on the margin. We must deal with and prioritize poor and low-wealth communities that have suffered from the deindustrialization and from rural communities and communities that are dependent on fossil fuels. We must have programs that include this guaranteed adequate income. We see it now. There's no way out of the damage of COVID. There's no way out of this Great Depression that we're in. There's no way out of it without a great destruction if we don't feed and give the money that is necessary for people to come up out of this. These things must be our demands. We must have a first 50-day agenda for the new administration that comes in, not a first 2-year agenda or first 100-day agenda. We must demand immigration reform. That must happen. We must ensure that our immigrant brothers and sisters are eligible for all public assistance and welfare programs, including health care and unemployment and housing and food security and child care programs and education and worker protection and the right to join unions. And we must be clear that we will not allow anybody that God made to be called an illegal alien or an illegal person. We must demand, and it must be made clear, that we will have cuts to the military and redirect those monies from the military and redirect some of the resources from policing to address the issue of immigration, and redirect money from prisons, and redirect money from a border wall, and redirect monies from the unfair tax cuts for corporations and Wall Street, and use that redirected money for investments to uplift communities that have been hurting. What else is our charge? In the face of a president absorbed in the asinine assumptions of his own misguided racist arrogance, enabled by all those who go along to get along, what is our charge? In the face of a Senate leader whose failures to restore the Voting Rights Act place him alongside the racist Southern senators like Strom Thurmond and Jesse Helms, a senator who has practiced in the 21st century his own version of interposition and nullification as the majority leader of the United States Senate in McConnell. What is our charge? Our charge is to simply and yet profoundly go forth and go forward. We must go forth and go forward. On that day 50 years ago, Dr. King said, go back. Since we're gathering digitally, we must say go forth and go forward. We must go forth and go forward, organizing from Appalachia to Black Alabama, from white Appalachia to Black Alabama, from Latino Texas to native Arizona, from Maine to Mississippi, from Kentucky to California, from Washington State to Washington, D.C. And our charge must be to organize and register people to vote. We must do more, mobilizing, organizing, registering people for a movement who vote, not just to vote, but for a movement who vote, a movement that will show up at the polls, and then after people are elected will show up in their offices and show up in their streets, demanding the justice that must be. We must put our works and faith together, because faith without works is dead, but faith with works is powerful. And 57 years later, we must remember something Dr. King would say 4 years after the March on Washington. And he said the only group who could form the massive restructure of American society would be for blacks, poor whites, progressive whites, working class people, and even recipients of welfare to come together in what Queen Latifah called UNITY. This may be the only coalition, he said, that could shift America's economic architecture and make the profound changes necessary to care for all her people. And sadly, we know it to be true, because 57 years later, because that coalition was never fully engaged, we still face the challenges we have today. And so we are charged from this moment to go forth and go forward, knowing that we have the power to unleash the power of the poor. We have the power. Poor and low-income people are 25% of the electorate. If just 1 to 19% of poor and low-income people of every race, creed, color, and sexuality would organize around an agenda and vote, it would change the political calculus in the country, even throughout the South. And if you change the South, you change the entire nation. We are charged to know and believe that black people and Latino people and native people and poor people have the political power to change the moral and political direction of this country. We are charged to fight for a bottom-up stimulus that gets those communities that are stuck in the mud unstuck and then causes them to rise. King said, go back. We must say, go forth and go forward. We must go forth and forward knowing that this is the moment that we've been granted to be alive in this moment. That COVID-19 is forcing all of us to understand how much we need each other and how much it is a national security not to address the issue of racism and poverty. For this virus is exploiting the wounds of systemic racism and poverty. If we had addressed them before the virus would not have the power that it has. But since we didn't, in the midst of this, now we are being called to address it like never before. And so I know that forward together, we can replace all of this ugly stuff with a call that will establish justice and reparations for all. I know forward together, we can make it so every vote is free, full, and never abridged by any state or any discrimination or suppression anywhere. I know forward together, every person can have health care attached to the worth of their humanity and not to the profit of a corporation. I know forward together, we will make it so that the work that we do means you have a living wage and you have labor rights. I know forward together, the least of these can be lifted and helped, and we can do it as though we are helping God, God's self, because we are. I know forward together, we can take care of the air and the water and the land as though it is all God's gift and not to be used as a focus of our greed. I know forward together, children can be loved and lifted and educated and never abused and mistreated. I know forward together, our First Nation, indigenous families can be treated as the nations they are and fully restored. I know forward together, immigrants can be welcome. We can still say, give me your tithe, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to be free. I know forward together, we can tear down unjust walls. We can tear down detention centers. We can destroy all of the things that destroy God's humanity, and we can build up justice. I know that forward together, we can stop the murders of our sons and daughters by racist police or any criminal that dares to kill our children and our people in our community. I know forward together, we with God's help can build a third reconstruction that overturns the long train of abuses, the long train of injustices, and that we can fully secure life and liberty and the pursuit of happiness for all. I know forward together, and I believe forward together, one can still chase 1,000, and two can still put 10,000 to flight. I know forward together, I believe forward together, that the lion can still lay down with the lamb. I still believe that forward together, wrapped up in the Spirit of God, crucifixions of wrong and inequality can be turned to mighty movements of transformation. I know forward together, this land is your land and this land is my land. I know forward together, black and white and brown and red and yellow and gay and straight and every color and every creed and every race and every geography, we can shake and reshape the very foundations of this nation. I know forward together, no hope is too unbelievable. No height is too unreachable. When it comes to justice, no dream is too impossible. When it comes to doing what's right, no goal is unattainable. Forward together must be our charge and the way we go forth and go forward. Forward together, keep your head up, as the brothers and the rappers say. Everybody has a right to live. And as the poet declared, Lord, grant us courage for the facing of this hour. Cure thy children's warring madness. Bend our pride to thy control. Shame our wanton selfish gladness. Rich in things and poor in soul. Save us from weak resignation to the evils we deplore. Let the search for thy salvation, our glory, your glory forevermore. Forward together. Forward together. That is our call. That is our mandate. forward together, forward together, forward together, and not one step back.
I woke up this morning with my mind stayed on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Yeah, yeah,
I want to thank you for joining us over the last 2 days. And I hope with all of the powerful speakers that presented, you were able to glean the necessary energy to move forward. I want to ask you now to go to naacp.org/volunteer and sign up. We must build an army of democracy leaders to ensure we turn out to vote in November. The next march we're going to call on you to do physically is to the polls. We must vote. Our lives depend on it.